Welcome back to Saints and Sinners, the place where legends ride hard, history gets dusty, and truth shows up wearing someone else's boots. Go ahead and hit follow, subscribe, and stay with us, because today's tale, well, it starts the way a lot of great stories do. A rider, a battlefield, and a kingdom wandering through a desert on a horse with no name. The sun was merciless, the land was cracked like old parchment, and an entire people were stumbling through a war they were losing, dry-mouthed, dust-covered, and praying for rain that never came. The kind of place where the wind whistles a tune that sounds suspiciously familiar. A wandering melody about getting lost and maybe being found. Then, just as the last drops of hope were evaporating, a shadow appeared on the horizon. Not a cloud, not an army, but a horse. A war horse, rider cloaked in brilliance, cutting through the heat haze like a mirage with a mission. No one knew his name. No one agreed on where he came from, but everyone remembered what happened next. Because when this figure hit the battlefield, the ground didn't just shake. The story of the entirety of Christendom did. So saddle up, tighten the reins, and keep your eyes on the horizon. This is Saints and Sinners. The crescent moon of Islam had swept across the Iberian Peninsula, like Vin Diesel driving a Supra, fast and furious. What once belonged to Visigoth kings and Christian bishops now bore the mark of the Umayyad Caliphate. Cathedrals turned into mosques, Arabic echoing through once Latin towns, and the Christian kingdoms shattered, scattered, and shrinking by the day. But not extinguished. In the rugged, rain-soaked mountains of the north, something simmered. The Moors called it Al-Gharb al-Andalus, the western land of the Vandals. But the Christians, they had a different word for it. Reconquista, the taking back. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't unified, and it wasn't GTO fast. The Reconquista would take over 700 years, a slow, brutal claw of blood and banners, of crusades and counter-crusades. Kings were crowned and corpses piled up, sometimes in the same day. But in the chaos, people needed a symbol, someone to rally behind, a name that could turn terrified peasants into fearless soldiers, that could inspire a nation of fragmented kingdoms to believe that heaven itself might fight beside them. And that's when the stories began, in whispers. In the midst of a Moorish assault, on the brink of Christian annihilation, a rider appeared, clad in white, sword gleaming, breaking through the lines and absolutely decimating the Moors' foothold. They say that one swipe from his sword killed 500 Moors. The Moors, they fell back. The Christians surged forward. And just like that, an unlikely victory snatched from the jaws of defeat. Before he became a banner in battle, before the white stallion and the swinging sword, before anyone whispered his name in desperation, he was just a man, not a king, not a warrior, not even a soldier. He came from a dusty fishing village, the kind of place where calluses outnumber coins and tempers flare faster than fires. He was a man of impulse, of fire and thunder, of deep loyalty and even deeper flaws. He led a dangerous life, taking on dangerous missions, leading him far from the familiar waters of home. Ultimately, it led him here, to the brink of destruction, where yet again he came out on top. But before this battle, he journeyed to a wild, unconquered edge of the known world, where gods were many, morals were murky, and the soil refused to bloom with anything but blood. There in the land of ancient spirits and stone idols, he fished for something new, something that sounded like madness. Souls. Eventually his voice went silent, not by choice, but by the blade. Centuries later, he reemerges. In the same hills his body was laid, this time with a blade of his own. He didn't shout, he didn't bleed, he just appeared. And wherever he charged, the tide turned, more scattered. Battles won, kingdoms reclaimed. Some say it was a dream, others a symbol. But soldiers swore it was real. They called him Matamoros, the Moor Slayer. The name echoed like a war cry across the land. Statues rose, banners waved, and suddenly this once forgotten fisherman became a general in a war he never signed up for, and perhaps never approved of. But history doesn't always ask for permission. Spain needed a hero, so legend supplied one. And what better symbol for a righteous war than a sword-swinging saint sent from the heavens? Kings began invoking his name before battle. Priests blessed troops under his banner. Peasants and nobles alike came to fight under him. It wasn't long before art began to take hold of the saint-turned-soldier. Gone was the humble fisherman. Now, Matamoros appeared in frescoes with a raised sword galloping over trampled moors, eyes blazing like judgment itself. He was heaven's executioner, justice incarnate, a holy terror. And the church? Well, it didn't object, because the image worked. Matamoros became both relic and rally cry. But somewhere in the mix, between banners and bloodshed, questions began to stir. Was there really a man in white armor who rode out of the sky to turn the tide of war? Or was he born in the minds of desperate men, sculpted from myth, forged in battle, and dressed in the clothes of divine intervention? The skeptics say it was just propaganda, a medieval morale booster wrapped in saintly shine. The faithful say it was all true, divine intervention when everything was at its bleakest moment. Either way, belief, like a sword, doesn't need your permission to leave a mark. And Matamoros, he left one the size of an empire. He became the face of the Reconquista, Spain's centuries-long mission to reclaim the land from Islamic rule. And when that mission finally reached its bloodied, weary end in 1492, Queen Isabella didn't celebrate with parades. She looked west. Because if Spain could be taken back for Christ, then maybe, just maybe, the world could too. The same queen who flew banners of Matamoros in battle is the one who pawned her crown jewels to fund a Genoese sailor's crazy dream, to find a new route to the Indies, and in doing so, spread the gospel to lands untouched by Rome or Mecca. You can trace the line, however crooked it may be, from a shimmering horseman on a battlefield to ships setting sail into the unknown. Because whether Matamoros rode from heaven or from the hopes of a desperate people, the legend moved empires because he gave the broken something to believe in. He gave the fearful a reason to rise. It shaped a national identity. It carried Christendom across oceans, and it shouted into the night what many feared to whisper. If Christianity didn't advance, something else would. And that's power. So who is Matamoros? He just so happens to be St. James the Greater, apostle and martyr, friend of Jesus and patron of Spain. So was it all a myth? A battlefield hallucination? A weaponized vision crafted by monarchs and monks to stir the masses? Maybe. Or maybe it was something more. We may never know. Faith or fiction, Santiago Matamoros is responsible for shaping the soul of Spain, seeding the age of exploration, and reminding us that belief, real or imagined, always leaves a trail. But here's what we do know. When people believe, really believe, something begins to shift. Faith can move mountains. Empires will fall, and men will rise to the occasion. Whether he rode a warhorse or rode through the pages of imagination, Matamoros became more than a myth. He became a movement. Because sometimes what saves a people isn't the sword, it's the story. Sometimes in blood, sometimes in ink, but always in memory. And stories, the right ones, are more dangerous than any blade. So the next time you find yourself in a battle, spiritual or otherwise, remember, if faith the size of a mustard seed can and does move mountains and empires, what will it do for you? What parts of your soul's battlefield need to be reconquered? What corners of your uncharted heart can it enlighten and transform? Leave a review, hit subscribe, and follow us as we dig up more stories where the sacred meets the scarred. Until then, keep your sword sharp, your saddle ready, and your eyes always on the horizon. Because saints rise, sinners fall, and history bears witness.